The Korthax invasion fleet arrived at Earth's solar system like a plague of metal locusts. Their ships, each one the size of a small city, blotted out the stars as they approached humanity's home world. For the Korthax, this was just another routine harvesting operation. They had done this to countless worlds across the galaxy, stripping them of their resources and leaving behind empty husks floating in the cosmic void. Admiral Zektar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devourer, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger on his screens. His four eyes gleamed with satisfaction as his sensors detected the rich deposits of rare minerals beneath the planet's surface. Lithium, platinum, uranium, and dozens of other precious elements that would fuel the Korthax Empire for generations. But what made his mandibles click with greed was the detection of something far more valuable than any metal. The humans. The bipedal creatures crawling across Earth's surface represented the most valuable resource of all. Their neural patterns were perfect for powering the Korthax's vast computational networks. A single human brain, properly harvested and integrated into their systems, could process data for centuries. The Korthax had built their technological supremacy on the minds of conquered species, and humans showed exceptional compatibility with their neural interface technology. How many of the meat creatures inhabit this world? Zektar asked his tactical officer. Approximately 8 billion, Admiral. Their technology is primitive, mostly chemical propulsion and basic electromagnetic weapons. They have no energy shields, no plasma cannons, no quantum barriers. This should be a simple harvesting operation. Zektar's laugh was like grinding metal. The Korthax had conquered over 300 worlds in the past millennium. Each time the pattern was the same. The native species would resist with whatever crude weapons they possessed, then surrender when faced with the overwhelming superiority of Korthax technology. The survivors would be processed, their useful organs harvested, their minds integrated into the collective. The first wave of Korthax ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling meteors. Their energy weapons carved through the planet's military defenses as if they were made of paper. Fighter jets exploded in midair before their pilots could even see what hit them. Naval vessels sank beneath waves of superheated plasma. Ground forces found their tanks reduced to molten slag by weapons that seemed to bend reality itself. In the sprawling metropolis of New York, people ran screaming through the streets as towering Korthax war machines stalked between the skyscrapers. The aliens stood 12 feet tall, their exoskeletons gleaming with built-in weapons and armor that could deflect any human projectile. Their harvesting began immediately. Massive collection ships descended into populated areas, their tractor beams sweeping up thousands of humans at a time. Sarah Chen huddled in the basement of her apartment building with 30 other survivors, listening to the sounds of destruction above. She was a computer programmer who had never imagined she would spend her last day watching humanity face extinction. Through the small basement window, she could see the alien ships methodically working their way through the city, their beams of light pulling people up into their hulls like some twisted rapture. "Why are they doing this to us?" whispered an elderly man beside her. "What did we ever do to them?" Sarah had no answer. None of them did. The aliens had given no warning, no demands, no explanation. They had simply arrived and begun taking everything they wanted. Across the planet, the same scene played out in every major city. London, Tokyo, Moscow, Lagos, Mexico City, all fell within hours to the Korthax war machine. The aliens' technology was so far beyond human understanding that resistance seemed impossible. Energy weapons that could level buildings, force fields that deflected nuclear missiles, gravity manipulation that could lift entire city blocks into the air. But the Korthax had made one crucial error in their assessment of humanity. They had detected the obvious resources, the minerals, the metals, the biological wealth. They had scanned the surface and found a species that seemed ripe for harvesting. What they had not detected were the things that lay deeper, much deeper. Beneath the ocean floors, in the deepest trenches where no human had ever ventured, something ancient stirred. The Korthax energy weapons, powerful enough to crack continents, had sent vibrations through the planet's crust that reached places that had been undisturbed for millions of years. In caverns that predated human civilization by eons, systems that had been dormant since before the rise of dinosaurs began to activate. The first sign that something was wrong came when Zektar's fleet detected massive energy signatures emerging from beneath Earth's surface. These weren't human readings. They were something else entirely, something that made their most advanced sensors struggle to get accurate data. "Admiral," his science officer reported, his voice carrying an edge of uncertainty that Zektar had never heard before. "We're detecting artificial structures beneath the planet's crust. They appear to be very old." "How old?" "Initial scans suggest they predate any known civilization in this region of the galaxy by at least 65 million years. Zektar's satisfaction began to curdle into unease. In all their conquests, the Korthax had never encountered anything like this. Ancient structures meant ancient technology, and ancient technology could mean ancient defenders. He ordered his fleet to maintain their current positions while they gathered more data. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility that had been built when the continents were still forming, something that had been waiting for eons finally received the signal it had been programmed to recognize. The death cries of Earth's biosphere had triggered protocols that were older than complex life itself. The Guardians were awakening. They had been placed there by a species whose name was lost to time, a civilization so advanced that they had transcended physical existence itself. Before departing for higher dimensions, they had left behind automated defenders on worlds that showed promise for developing intelligent life. Earth had been one of those worlds. For 65 million years, the Guardians had waited. They had watched ice ages come and go. They had observed the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. They had monitored the slow emergence of mammals, the development of primates, and finally the appearance of humans. Through it all, they had remained dormant, their instructions clear. Protect this world's intelligent life from extinction-level threats. The Korthax invasion qualified. The first Guardian to emerge from its ancient resting place did so beneath the Mariana Trench. It had been sleeping in a chamber carved from solid bedrock, surrounded by technology that defied every known law of physics. As it awakened, systems that had been monitoring Earth for millions of years began feeding it information about the current threat. The Guardian was not biological in any sense that humans would understand. It was a fusion of consciousness and machine, a being that existed as pure thought given form through technology that could manipulate matter at the quantum level. Its body, if it could be called that, was a constantly shifting mass of energy and exotic matter that could take any shape necessary to complete its mission. As it rose through 7 miles of ocean water, it analyzed the Korthax invasion with processing power that dwarfed entire planetary computer networks. Within nanoseconds, it understood their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses. The Korthax were advanced, yes, but they were also young. Their civilization was barely 50,000 years old, making them infants compared to the species that had created the Guardians. Admiral Zektar was reviewing invasion progress reports when his flagship's hull began to vibrate. At first, he assumed it was atmospheric turbulence, but the vibrations grew stronger and more rhythmic. They seemed to be coming from below, rising up through the ocean depths. "Admiral," his sensor operator called out, voice tight with confusion. "I'm reading massive displacement of water beneath us. Something is approaching from the ocean floor at incredible speed." "Show me," Zektar commanded. The main screen displayed the ocean beneath their position. For a moment, there was nothing but the standard blue-black of deep water. Then something appeared that made every Korthax on the bridge step backward in shock. It rose like a living mountain, but its surface rippled and flowed like liquid metal. The thing was enormous, easily the size of their largest battleship, but it moved through the water without any visible means of propulsion. Tendrils of energy crackled around it, turning the surrounding seawater into glowing plasma that didn't seem to harm the creature at all. "What in the void is that?" Zektar whispered. His question was answered when the Guardian emerged from the ocean surface in a waterspout that reached toward the clouds. It hovered in the air for a moment, water streaming from its impossible form before it began to speak. Its voice came not through radio waves or sound, but directly into the minds of every Korthax in the fleet. "You have come to this world as conquerors," the Guardian said, its mental voice carrying the weight of geological ages. "You harvest the children of Earth as if they were crops to be gathered. This cannot be permitted." Zektar managed to find his voice. "What are you?" "You're not human. I am older than your species by millions of years. I am the Guardian of this world, placed here by beings you could never comprehend. You will cease your harvesting immediately and depart this system." The Admiral's shock was rapidly being replaced by anger. No primitive had ever spoken to him this way, certainly not some ancient relic that had crawled up from the ocean floor. "I command the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. If you think some parlor tricks with water manipulation will frighten us, you're mistaken. Stand down or be destroyed. The Guardian's response was to reach out with tendrils of pure energy that wrapped around 3 of the smaller Korthax ships. The vessels, each armed with enough firepower to level a continent, simply ceased to exist. They didn't explode, they didn't burn. They were there one moment and gone the next, as if they had never been built at all. Your weapons cannot harm me, the Guardian explained with the patience of stone. Your shields cannot protect you. Your technology is the product of a young civilization that understands only a fraction of the universe's true nature. Leave now, while you still can. But Zektar was a career military commander who had never retreated from any battle. The destruction of his ships only enraged him further. All vessels, open fire! Destroy this thing! The Korthax fleet responded instantly. Energy beams that could pierce planetary crust converged on the Guardian from dozens of ships. Missiles that carried antimatter warheads streaked through the air. Gravity weapons that could create artificial black holes focused their power on the ancient defender. The attack lasted for nearly a full minute, filling the sky with enough destructive energy to sterilize a small moon. When the light faded and the sensors cleared, the Guardian remained exactly where it had been, completely unharmed. Not only that, but it seemed to have grown larger, as if it had somehow absorbed the energy of their attacks. Impossible, breathed Zektar's weapons officer. Nothing can withstand that much concentrated firepower. The Guardian's response was swift and devastating. It extended itself across the sky like a living storm cloud, tendrils of coherent energy reaching toward every ship in the Korthax fleet. But instead of destroying them, it began to do something far more unsettling. It began to change them. The hulls of the alien warships started to ripple and flow like liquid. Their weapon systems turned inward. Their armor became soft and pliable. Within minutes, the mighty Korthax fleet had been transformed into something that looked more like a collection of abstract sculptures than military vessels. Inside the transformed ships, the Korthax crew found themselves trapped but unharmed. Their weapons no longer functioned. Their engines would not respond, but their life support systems continued to work perfectly. They had been rendered completely helpless without a single casualty. You came here to harvest, the Guardian said, its voice now carrying amusement. Let me show you what a true harvest looks like. Across the planet's surface, more Guardians began to emerge. They rose from deep caves in the Himalayas, from the heart of the Amazon rainforest, from beneath the ice sheets of Antarctica. Each one was different in form but identical in purpose. They had awakened to defend Earth and its people. The second Guardian emerged in the heart of Africa, appearing as a pillar of crystalline light that stretched from the ground to the stratosphere. It began to sing, and its song had a very specific effect on Korthax technology. Every piece of alien equipment within 1,000 miles simply shut down. Not destroyed, not damaged, just turned off, as if someone had flipped a cosmic power switch. The third Guardian manifested in the Australian outback as a geometric pattern that existed in more dimensions than human eyes could perceive. It reached out with invisible hands and began to gently lift the captured humans from the Korthax collection ships, returning them safely to the ground while leaving their captors stranded in powerless vessels. In her basement hideout, Sarah Chen felt the building stop shaking. The sounds of destruction from above had ceased, replaced by something that sounded almost like music. She crept up the stairs and peered out through a crack in the door. What she saw defied every assumption she had about the universe. The Korthax war machines that had been terrorizing the city stood motionless, their weapons dark and their armor somehow looking fragile. Above them, a shape that hurt to look at directly was moving through the air, and wherever it passed, the alien technology simply stopped working. "Are we saved?" whispered the old man who had been beside her in the basement. Sarah didn't know how to answer. Whatever was happening, it was clear that humanity had protectors they never knew existed. But who were they, and what did they want in return? Around the world, humans emerged from their hiding places to witness something unprecedented in the history of their species. The alien invaders who had seemed unstoppable were now helpless, their technology neutralized by beings that defied comprehension. But as the immediate threat receded, a new kind of terror began to take hold. These Guardians were clearly not human, and their power was so vast that it made the Korthax look like children playing with toys. What did they want? What were their intentions toward humanity? Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist who had been trapped in her laboratory when the invasion began, watched through her window as one of the Guardians approached the city. This one appeared as a constantly shifting geometric form that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As it moved, the very air around it shimmered with energies that her instruments couldn't even begin to measure. The Guardian paused outside her building, and suddenly Elena found herself paralyzed as a voice spoke directly into her mind. "Do not fear us, child of Earth. We are not your conquerors." The mental voice was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. It carried layers of meaning that her human brain could barely process, emotions and concepts that her species had no words for. Yet somehow she understood. "What are you?" She managed to think back. "We are the Watchers, the protectors left behind by those who came before. Your species was chosen long ago as worthy of preservation. We have waited through the ages for you to grow, to learn, to become what you were meant to be." Chosen? By whom? The Guardian's form pulsed with what might have been sadness. By beings who transcended physical existence before your son was born. They saw potential in the genetic patterns that would one day become humanity. They left us here to ensure that potential would not be destroyed by threats from beyond your world. Elena's scientific mind raced with questions. But before she could ask them, the Guardian continued. "Your species stands at a crossroads. The Korthax invasion was not random. There are others like them. Other harvesters who seek to strip worlds of their resources and sentient life. Your planet's location makes it valuable to many such species. We can protect you from them, but protection comes with a price." "What kind of price?" "Change. Growth. The abandonment of paths that lead only to self-destruction. Your species has great potential, but you also have great flaws. Wars, hatred, the poisoning of your own world. If you are to be truly defended, you must become worthy of defense." Meanwhile, aboard the Korthax flagship, Admiral Zektar was discovering that his situation was far worse than he had initially realized. The Guardian that had transformed his fleet was now inside his ship, its presence filling every corridor and chamber with an alien energy that made his crew tremble with instinctive fear. But the creature wasn't harming them. Instead, it seemed to be studying them, examining their technology and their culture, with the detached interest of a scientist observing bacteria under a microscope. "Your species has potential," the Guardian said, its voice echoing through the ship's communication system. "But you have chosen the path of the parasite. You consume other civilizations to feed your own growth. This is not sustainability. It is a disease that spreads through the galaxy." Zektar tried to maintain his dignity as a military commander, but it was difficult when faced with a being that could reshape reality at will. "We are survivors. The strong take from the weak. That is the natural order." "The natural order," the Guardian repeated and somehow managed to make the words sound profoundly sad. "Your understanding of nature is limited by your youth. You see only competition, only the struggle for resources. You do not see the greater patterns, the way truly advanced civilizations learn to create rather than merely consume." The Guardian's form shifted, and suddenly the bridge of the Korthax ship was filled with images, visions of civilizations across the galaxy that had chosen different paths. Species that had learned to work together rather than prey on each other. Worlds where technology was used to create abundance rather than weapons of conquest. "This is impossible," Zektar whispered. "Cooperation on such a scale would lead to weakness, stagnation, would it?" The Guardian asked. "Observe." The images shifted to show the homeworlds of the cooperative species. They were paradises of technology and nature working in harmony. Their cities were works of art that spanned continents. Their people lived for thousands of years, pursuing knowledge and beauty, and the exploration of the universe's deepest mysteries. These civilizations have existed for millions of years, the Guardian explained. They have spread across thousands of worlds, not as conquerors but as gardeners helping younger species to grow and flourish. They create new stars when old ones die, guide the evolution of life itself, push back the very boundaries of space and time. This is what your species could become if you chose a different path. Back on Earth's surface, human governments were struggling to understand what was happening. The alien invasion had been devastating enough, but now they faced the reality that their planet was under the protection of beings whose power was beyond measurement. Emergency sessions were called in every major capital. Though normal communication systems were still disrupted by the lingering effects of the Guardian's energy fields. President Martinez of the United States managed to establish contact with other world leaders through a hastily assembled radio network. The conversations were tense and filled with uncertainty. "What do we know about these guardians?" asked the Prime Minister of Japan. "Nothing concrete," Martinez replied. "Our scientists are still trying to analyze the energy readings, but their instruments keep giving impossible results. Whatever these beings are, they're operating on principles of physics we don't understand. The real question," interjected the Russian premier, "is what they want from us. No one intervenes in a conflict without expecting something in return." That question was answered when Guardians began appearing near the world's major population centers, not as conquerors or destroyers, but as teachers. They reached out to scientists, philosophers, and leaders, sharing knowledge that humanity had never imagined possible. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a theoretical physicist at Tokyo University, found herself face-to-face with a guardian that appeared as a sphere of pure mathematics, its surface covered with equations that described the fundamental nature of reality. As she watched, transfixed, the equations began to make sense to her in ways that defied her training. "Your species understands perhaps 1% of the universe's true nature," the guardian explained. "You have barely begun to explore the possibilities of matter and energy, consciousness and time. But you have the capacity to learn, to grow beyond your current limitations." "What are you teaching us?" Tanaka asked. "The basics. How to manipulate matter at the quantum level. How to access energy sources that dwarf your current technology. How to extend human consciousness beyond the boundaries of individual minds. But most importantly, how to use this knowledge responsibly." Similar scenes were playing out around the world. Guardians were sharing technology that could solve humanity's energy crisis, cure diseases, even extend human lifespan indefinitely. But with each gift came warnings about the responsibilities that accompanied such power. As night fell on the first day of the Guardian intervention, humanity faced a choice that would determine the future of their species. They could accept the offered protection and guidance, but doing so would require them to abandon many of the behaviors and beliefs that had defined human civilization for millennia. Sarah Chen stood on her apartment building's roof, looking up at the night sky that now contained alien vessels rendered harmless by forces beyond human understanding. The Guardians had saved her species from extinction, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of an even greater transformation. 3 months after the Guardian intervention, Earth had become a planet divided, not by the old boundaries of nations and continents, but by those who embraced the Guardians' teachings and those who feared them. The transformations had begun almost immediately. In laboratories around the world, human scientists worked alongside Guardian mentors to unlock technologies that seemed like magic. Cold fusion reactors the size of refrigerators produced enough energy to power entire cities. Medical devices that could repair genetic damage and regenerate lost organs. Agricultural systems that could grow crops in any environment, even in the depths of space. But with each breakthrough came demonstrations of just how far humanity had to evolve. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been chosen as one of the primary human liaisons to the Guardians. Her laboratory had been transformed into something that resembled a shrine more than a research facility, filled with devices that operated on principles she was still struggling to understand. The Guardian she worked with most closely had taken to appearing as a pillar of shifting light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Your species learns quickly," the Guardian observed as Elena successfully activated a consciousness expansion device for the first time. "But you also resist. Many of your people prefer the familiar pain of limitation to the uncertain joy of growth." Elena nodded, thinking of the growing protests outside her lab. Half the world saw the Guardians as saviors, but the other half viewed them as invaders who had simply chosen a subtler form of conquest. Religious leaders proclaimed them angels or demons depending on their theology. Politicians struggled to maintain authority in a world where the old power structures were becoming meaningless. "It's not that they don't want to grow," Elena explained. "It's that growth is terrifying. Everything they've believed about reality, about human nature, about our place in the universe. You're asking us to throw it all away." "Not throw away," the Guardian corrected. "Expand beyond. Truth is not diminished by greater truth. Your current understanding of physics is not wrong, merely incomplete. Your human values of courage, creativity, and compassion are not obsolete, merely ready to be expressed on a cosmic scale. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass from the street outside. Elena rushed to her window and saw a mob of protesters hurling stones at her building. Their chants were familiar by now. Humanity first. No alien masters. Earth for humans. The irony wasn't lost on her. These same people would have been dead or enslaved if not for Guardian intervention. Yet they saw their protectors as a greater threat than the Korthax had been. The Guardian's light dimmed. Perhaps we made an error. Perhaps your species was not ready for this knowledge. No, Elena said firmly. We're never ready for change. We have to choose to be ready, and some of us have made that choice. She was referring to the growing communities of humans who had fully embraced Guardian teachings. They called themselves the Transcended, though their critics used less flattering terms. These communities had begun to develop capabilities that seemed superhuman to traditional Earth dwellers. In New Zealand, a group of former software engineers had learned to interface directly with Guardian technology, using only their enhanced consciousness. They could manipulate matter at the molecular level, travel vast distances by shifting their awareness through folded space, and communicate through quantum entanglement across any distance. In Chile, a community of artists and philosophers had developed new forms of creative expression that existed in dimensions beyond normal human perception. Their works of art could be experienced as music, visual beauty, mathematical concepts, and emotional states simultaneously. But perhaps the most significant development was happening in what used to be the Nevada desert. There, Dr. Marcus Webb, a former NASA engineer, was working with Guardians to build humanity's first truly interstellar vessel. The ship, if it could be called that, bore no resemblance to any human concept of spacecraft. It existed as a semi-living entity that could reshape itself according to need, travel faster than light by stepping outside normal spacetime, and sustain its crew indefinitely by converting energy directly from the quantum vacuum. This is how the species that created us traveled the galaxy, the Guardian explained as Webb watched the vessel grow from a seed of crystallized thought into something the size of a small city. Not as passengers in crude metal containers, but as conscious beings exploring infinite possibilities. Webb ran his hands along the ship's surface, feeling it respond to his touch with what could only be described as affection. How many humans could it carry? As many as choose to embark. The boundaries of physical space are meaningless at this level of technology. But the more important question is, where will they go? That question was answered when the Korthax Admiral Zektar requested a meeting with human leaders. His fleet remained in Earth orbit, powerless but not destroyed, its crew sustained by Guardian technology that provided for their every need while keeping them safely contained. The meeting took place in what had once been the United Nations building in New York. The Guardians had transformed it into something that could accommodate beings of vastly different physiologies and consciousness levels. Zektar appeared via a holographic projection that allowed him to participate without leaving his disabled flagship. "I bring a warning," he said, his translator rendering his clicking mandibles into human speech. "The Korthax Empire was not the only threat to your world. Word of this planet's resources has spread throughout the galaxy. Others will come, and they will come in greater numbers." President Martinez leaned forward in her chair. "What others?" "The Void Hunters who consume entire star systems to fuel their dark technology. The hive minds that convert organic matter into extensions of their collective consciousness. The machine courts that view biological life as an inefficiency to be corrected. Each of them commands fleets that dwarf what we brought to your world." The human leaders exchanged worried glances, but Elena noticed that the Guardian representatives showed no concern. Their forms pulsed with what she had learned to recognize as amusement. "Why are you telling us this?" asked the Prime Minister of Britain. Zektar's hologram flickered as he struggled with emotions his species rarely expressed. "Because in the months we have been here, we have learned something that changes everything. Your Guardians, they are not unique to Earth." The room fell silent. Every world we have conquered, every species we have enslaved, they all had the potential for guardians of their own. But they made different choices. They chose fear over growth, isolation over cooperation, power over wisdom. They never became worthy of protection. Elena felt a chill run down her spine as the implications sank in. Your species is being tested, Sektar continued. The Guardians will not protect you forever. They are preparing you for something greater, but only if you prove capable of growth. If you fail, if you choose the path of our other victims, you will face the next invasion alone. One of the Guardian representatives finally spoke, its voice carrying the weight of geological ages. Admiral Sektar speaks truth, though he understands only a fragment of it. The next phase of your development cannot be forced. It must be chosen freely by each individual human and by your species as a whole. What kind of choice? Martinez asked. Whether to remain bound to this single world, hiding behind our protection, while the galaxy burns around you, or to take your place among the species that guard and guide the cosmos itself. The ship growing in your Nevada desert is a gift, but also a test. It can carry your people to worlds beyond counting, but only if you are ready to use that capability responsibly. Elena suddenly understood. You're not just protecting us from other species. You're preparing us to protect other species. Precisely. The universe is vast and filled with young civilizations that face the same choice you face now. Some will choose wisdom. Others will choose conquest. The balance between these forces determines whether the galaxy evolves toward greater consciousness or slides into an age of darkness. The meeting ended with humanity facing its greatest decision yet. They could accept Guardian protection and remain safely on Earth, or they could risk everything to join the cosmic community as protectors themselves. But that choice would have to be made soon because Sektar's warning proved prophetic. Deep space monitoring stations detected the approach of new fleets, ones that made the Korthax invasion look like a minor raid. The next test was coming, and this time, the Guardians made it clear that humanity would have to stand on their own. The Void Hunters arrived exactly 6 months after the Korthax invasion, emerging from dark space like nightmares given form. Their ships were not built from metal or any recognizable material. They were crafted from compressed dark matter, vessels that existed in the spaces between atoms and fed on the life force of entire worlds. Unlike the Korthax, who had come seeking resources and slaves the Void Hunters came to devour. They consumed not just matter and energy, but the very patterns of existence that allowed life and consciousness to exist. Planets they visited became empty shells where not even bacteria could survive, where the fundamental forces that held atoms together had been weakened beyond repair. Their fleet numbered in the thousands, each ship a writhing mass of absolute darkness that hurt human eyes to look upon directly. As they approached Earth's solar system, stars began to dim in their wake, their light being drawn into the hungry void of the alien vessels. Sarah Chen stood in the command center of humanity's first Guardian-built defensive station, orbiting high above Earth's North Pole. In the 6 months since the Korthax defeat, she had been among the humans who embraced Guardian teachings most completely. Her consciousness had been expanded to interface directly with the station's systems, allowing her to perceive space and time in ways that would have driven her original human mind insane. But even with her enhanced awareness, the sight of the approaching Void Hunter fleet filled her with terror. How many? She asked the Guardian entity that shared her consciousness. Approximately 3,000 vessels, each capable of sterilizing a planet. But numbers are not the true measure of their threat. They exist partially outside normal spacetime. Your conventional physics cannot accurately predict their capabilities. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. The Guardian had made it clear that this battle would be humanity's to fight. They would provide guidance and technological support, but the actual defense of Earth would depend on how well humans had learned to use their new abilities. Around the solar system, other human-crewed stations prepared for battle. Dr. Elena Vasquez commanded the Scientific Analysis Station near Mars, using Guardian-enhanced instruments to probe the Void Hunter fleet for weaknesses. Dr. Marcus Webb piloted the prototype starship he had helped design, leading a small fleet of similar vessels crewed by humans who had learned to merge their consciousness with their ships. On Earth's surface, the divisions that had plagued humanity since the Guardian intervention suddenly seemed petty. The protesters who had demanded the aliens leave fell silent as they watched the approaching darkness. Even the most stubborn human supremacist couldn't deny that without Guardian technology, their species would have no hope of survival. But the Guardians had insisted that hope alone was not enough. Your species must choose, and the Guardian had told humanity's leaders just days before the Void Hunter arrival. Will you fight as individuals seeking only to preserve your own lives? Or will you fight as a unified consciousness dedicated to protecting all life in the galaxy? The Void Hunters can sense the difference. They are drawn to species that choose selfishness, repelled by those that choose unity. The test came sooner than expected. As the Void Hunter Vanguard entered Earth's solar system, they broadcast a message that bypassed all normal communication channels and spoke directly into every human mind on the planet. Creatures of flesh and fear, the voice whispered like the wind through graveyards. We offer you a choice. Surrender your world to us and we will allow some of you to live as our servants. Resist, and we will devour every trace of your existence, leaving nothing behind but empty space where your star system once spun. The message carried with it visions of worlds the Void Hunters had consumed. Once vibrant planets reduced to gray spheres of lifeless rock. Entire species transformed into shadows of their former selves, serving their devourers in exchange for the privilege of continued existence. But it also carried something the Void Hunters had not intended to share, a glimpse of their true nature. Sarah and the other enhanced humans perceived it instantly. The Void Hunters were not a natural species. They were the final form of a civilization that had chosen consumption over creation, power over wisdom. They had long ago consumed their own homeworld and turned themselves into living manifestations of entropy itself. They're us, Elena whispered over the quantum communication network, or what we could become if we make the wrong choices. This revelation sparked something unprecedented in human history. Across the planet, barriers of nationality, religion, ideology, and class dissolved as 8 billion people suddenly understood that they faced not just extinction, but the possibility of becoming monsters themselves. The response was swift and unified. Every human capable of interfacing with Guardian technology linked their consciousness into a vast network. Those without enhanced abilities contributed in their own ways, scientists sharing data, artists creating inspiration, children offering the simple certainty that life was worth fighting for. Sarah felt her individual awareness expand as she became part of something greater than herself. She was still Sarah Chen, but she was also Elena Vasquez analyzing enemy weaknesses, Marcus Webb preparing ship systems, every human defender preparing to protect their world. Most amazingly, she was also connected to the billions of humans on Earth's surface. Their combined will focused on a single purpose. The Void Hunters attacked without warning, their ships moving in patterns that defied normal physics. They could phase in and out of regular space, appear instantly at any point in the solar system, and their weapons drained energy directly from their target's atomic bonds. The first human defensive stations were overwhelmed within minutes. But as each one fell, something unexpected happened. Instead of being consumed by the Void Hunter attack, the energy was absorbed by the network of linked human consciousness and redirected to strengthen the remaining defenses. Impossible, the Void Hunter fleet commander transmitted, its voice now carrying notes of uncertainty. Your life patterns should have been disrupted. You should be falling into disorder and fear. Sarah found herself speaking for all of humanity as she replied, We are no longer the species you expected to find. We have learned that consciousness shared is consciousness strengthened. Your consumption only feeds our unity. The battle raged for hours, with Void Hunter ships appearing and disappearing like deadly phantoms, but each attack only demonstrated more clearly that humanity had fundamentally changed. When Webb's ship was damaged, a dozen others instantly shared their resources to repair it. When Elena's station was overwhelmed by enemy data attacks, every enhanced human in the system contributed processing power to help her fight back. Most importantly, the humans began to turn the Void Hunter's own weapons against them. The devices that drained atomic energy were reprogrammed to drain the dark matter that composed the enemy ships. The phase shift technology that allowed them to step outside normal space was hijacked and used to banish entire Void Hunter squadrons to dimensions where they could do no harm. By the time Earth's sun rose on the day after the invasion began, half the Void Hunter fleet had been destroyed or disabled, But the real victory was not in the ships that had been defeated. It was in what humanity had become. "You are no longer the species we came to consume," the Void Hunter commander admitted, its voice now carrying what sounded almost like respect. "You have achieved something we thought impossible. The transformation of individualistic consciousness into unified purpose without the loss of individual identity." The remaining Void Hunter ships began to retreat, but Sarah felt something unexpected through her enhanced awareness. Many of the individual Void Hunters were not retreating with their fleet. They were reaching out through the quantum network, asking for something humanity had never expected to provide. They were asking for redemption. "We were not always as we are now," one of them transmitted privately to Sarah. "We too were once a young species with potential for growth. But we chose consumption over creation, power over wisdom. We believed that to survive we must devour others. We became monsters by our own choice. Can that choice be unmade?" Sarah asked. "Perhaps. Your species has shown that consciousness can evolve beyond its origins. If you would teach us, we would learn to be something other than devourers." Sarah felt the decision rippling through the human network. 8 billion minds considered the question simultaneously. Should they help their former enemies find redemption, or should they drive them away to protect themselves? The answer came back unanimous. Humanity had learned that true strength came not from defeating enemies, but from transforming them into allies. 5 years had passed since the Void Hunter fleet retreated from Earth's solar system, leaving behind a small contingent of their kind who had chosen redemption over continued consumption. The transformation of these beings had become humanity's first great success as cosmic guardians, proving that even the most twisted consciousness could be healed with patience and wisdom. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the starship Unity, humanity's flagship in their growing fleet of interstellar vessels. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see the impossible sight of former Void Hunters working alongside human engineers to construct a new type of space station, one designed not for war, but for healing wounded civilizations. The project was ambitious beyond anything humanity had previously imagined. They were building a mobile restoration facility that could travel to worlds that had been damaged by consumption-based species like the Korthax and the old Void Hunters. Instead of merely liberating these worlds, they would help repair the damage and guide the surviving populations toward their own evolutionary breakthroughs. "Status report," Sarah requested as she settled into her command chair. Her consciousness instantly expanded to interface with the ship's systems, connecting her to every aspect of the vessels. "Operation, we're approaching the Kepler system," reported Lieutenant Commander Webb. Marcus had chosen to accept a military rank when humanity organized its Guardian fleet. "Intelligence from our Korthax allies suggests there's a recently conquered world there. Population enslaved by a species called the Iron Hegemony." Sarah nodded, still sometimes amazed by how much had changed. The Korthax, once Earth's would-be conquerors, had become some of humanity's most valuable allies after witnessing the transformation of the Void Hunters. Admiral Zektar had requested to join the Guardian fleet personally, bringing with him detailed knowledge of various predatory civilizations throughout the galaxy. The Iron Hegemony represents a particularly interesting challenge, continued the briefing from Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as the fleet's chief xenological advisor. "They don't consume other species like the Void Hunters or harvest them like the Korthax. Instead, they impose what they call optimization. They reshape conquered civilizations to serve as perfect components in their galactic empire." Sarah accessed the intelligence files directly through her neural interface. The Iron Hegemony had turned dozens of species into specialized slave races. One became living computers, another transformed into organic manufacturing systems, a third bred specifically to serve as biological weapons. Each conquered species lost their original culture, their individual identity, their potential for growth, everything that made them unique. "It's the opposite of what we've learned," Sarah mused. "Instead of helping species become more than they were, the Iron Hegemony reduces them to less than they could be." "Exactly. And according to Zektar, they've recently conquered the Atani homeworld." The Atani were a promising species, natural empaths who had developed a society based on emotional harmony. The Iron Hegemony is planning to turn them into biological mood regulators for their empire. The Unity dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler system. Immediately, Sarah's enhanced senses detected the presence of the Iron Hegemony fleet orbiting the fourth planet. Their ships were geometric perfection, crystalline structures that reflected no wasted energy, no unnecessary components, no trace of individual creativity or expression. "Hail the Iron Hegemony fleet," Sarah ordered. "Standard diplomatic protocols." The response came within moments. The view screen flickered to life, showing a being that was clearly the product of extensive self-modification. The Iron Hegemony leader appeared as a fusion of organic and mechanical components, its body optimized for maximum efficiency rather than aesthetic appeal. "I am Architect Prime Xenon 7, the being announced, its voice a synthesized harmony of multiple vocal cords. "You are operating in Iron Hegemony space without authorization. State your purpose or be classified as hostile." "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Guardian Fleet," Sarah replied formally. "We're here regarding the Atani world. We believe you've misunderstood their true potential." Xenon 7's mechanical eye focused on her with interest. "Explain." "You see them as biological mood regulators. We see them as potential healers of galactic consciousness. You're planning to optimize them for a single function. We believe they could evolve to serve the entire galaxy in ways you haven't imagined." The Architect Prime was silent for several seconds, processing this information. When it spoke again, there was something that might have been curiosity in its synthesized voice. "You speak of evolution. The Iron Hegemony has achieved the ultimate evolution. Perfect efficiency, optimal resource allocation, the elimination of wasteful variables. What could be superior to this?" Sarah smiled, remembering her own conversation with the Guardian 5 years earlier. "Would you like us to show you?" The demonstration began with the Unity's crew performing what appeared to be impossible. Human engineers worked alongside reformed void hunters to repair critical systems in real time, their combined consciousness allowing them to solve problems that should have required weeks of analysis. Former Korthax slave soldiers coordinated with human artists to create beautiful solutions to ugly tactical situations, but the real revelation came when Sarah invited Xenon 7 to temporarily link with the Guardian Fleet's consciousness network. "This will not harm you," she assured the Iron Hegemony leader. "It's simply a way of experiencing reality from a different perspective." The moment Xenon 7's consciousness touched the network, everything changed for the ancient machine being. Instead of seeing the galaxy as a collection of resources to be optimized, it suddenly perceived the infinite potential for growth, creativity, and consciousness expansion that existed in every living being. "This is inefficient," Xenon 7 whispered, but its voice carried wonder rather than condemnation. "Efficient at what?" Sarah asked gently. "You've optimized for resource allocation and task performance. But what if there are things more valuable than resources? What if the waste you eliminate is actually the source of something greater?" Through the network, Xenon 7 experienced music created by species that had never met but whose consciousness had touched across vast distances. It felt the joy of discovery shared by researchers who were exploring concepts that had no immediate practical application. Most powerfully, it witnessed the moment when the Void Hunters had chosen redemption over consumption, transforming from destroyers into creators. "Your efficiency is based on scarcity thinking," Elena added, her consciousness touching Xenon 7's through the network. "You assume that resources are limited, that consciousness is finite, that purpose must be narrowly defined. But consciousness shared is consciousness multiplied. Creativity unleashed creates new possibilities that never existed before." The Iron Hegemony leader was quiet for a long time, processing experiences that its civilization had never imagined possible. When it finally spoke, its voice had changed subtly. "The Atani, what would happen to them if we allowed your intervention?" "They would become what they were meant to be," Sarah replied. "Natural empaths who could help heal the psychological wounds that war and conquest have inflicted across the galaxy. They could serve as bridges between species, helping former enemies understand each other. They could make the entire galaxy more emotionally stable, not through regulation but through genuine healing." "And my people? The Iron Hegemony?" Sarah felt the weight of the moment. This was what Guardian work was truly about, not just protecting species from destruction, but helping them discover better versions of themselves. "Your people have mastered efficiency and optimization. Those are valuable skills, but they're only tools. What if you use those tools to optimize for consciousness growth instead of resource extraction? What if you helped species become the best possible versions of themselves instead of the most useful versions for your empire? The transformation wasn't immediate. Unlike the Void Hunters, who had been desperate for redemption, the Iron Hegemony was built on principles that made change difficult. But over the following months, Xenon 7 worked with human advisors to begin what they called the Great Reoptimization. The Atani were the first to benefit. Instead of being turned into biological mood regulators, they were taught to enhance their natural empathic abilities. Within a year, they had become the galaxy's first species of professional diplomatic healers, capable of resolving conflicts that had raged for centuries. The Iron Hegemony's other slave species were gradually offered similar choices, not the harsh freedom of independence, but the opportunity to discover what they might become if their unique abilities were developed rather than constrained. But the most significant change was in the Iron Hegemony itself. They began to see efficiency not as an end goal, but as a means to achieve something greater. Their perfect crystalline ships were redesigned to be not just functional, but beautiful. Their optimized soldiers learned to create art between battles. Their resource allocation specialists began studying poetry. Standing on the Unity's bridge a year later, watching Iron Hegemony ships working alongside Guardian fleet vessels to construct a new healing station, Sarah reflected on how much the galaxy. They could serve as bridges between species, helping former enemies understand each other. They could make the entire galaxy more emotionally stable, not through regulation but through genuine healing. And my people, the Iron Hegemony? Sarah felt the weight of the moment. This was what Guardian work was truly about. Not just protecting species from destruction, but helping them discover better versions of themselves. Your people have mastered efficiency and optimization. Those are valuable skills, but they're only tools. What if you use those tools to optimize for consciousness growth instead of resource extraction? What if you helped species become the best possible versions of themselves instead of the most useful versions for your empire? The transformation wasn't immediate. Unlike the Void Hunters, who had been desperate for redemption, the Iron Hegemony was built on principles that made change difficult. But over the following months, Xenon 7 worked with human advisors to begin what they called the Great Reoptimization. The Atani were the first to benefit. Instead of being turned into biological mood regulators, they were taught to enhance their natural empathic abilities. Within a year, they had become the galaxy's first species of professional diplomatic healers, capable of resolving conflicts that had raged for centuries. The Iron Hegemony's other slave species were gradually offered similar choices, not the harsh freedom of independence, but the opportunity to discover what they might become if their unique abilities were developed, rather than constrained. But the most significant change was in the Iron Hegemony itself. They began to see efficiency not as an end goal, but as a means to achieve something greater. Their perfect crystalline ships were redesigned to be not just functional but beautiful. Their optimized soldiers learned to create art between battles. Their resource allocation specialists began studying poetry. Standing on the Unity's bridge a year later, watching Iron Hegemony ships working alongside Guardian fleet vessels to construct a new healing station, Sarah reflected on how much the galaxy had changed. What had begun with Earth's desperate defense against the Korthax had evolved into something none of them could have imagined. They weren't just protecting worlds anymore. They were helping the entire galaxy discover new ways of being, new possibilities for consciousness and cooperation. The Guardian fleet now included reformed members of species that had once been enemies, all working together to ensure that younger civilizations would have the chance to choose growth over destruction. The ancient Guardians who had first protected Earth rarely manifested physically anymore, but Sarah could feel their approval resonating through the quantum networks that connected Guardian consciousness across the galaxy. Humanity had not just become worthy of protection, they had become protectors themselves, fulfilling their species' true destiny among the stars. The galaxy was still vast and full of challenges, but for the first time in cosmic history, the forces of growth and consciousness were gaining ground against the forces of consumption and destruction. And it had all begun with a small blue world that refused to surrender when faced with extinction.